I've just returned from a week at Kwasabuntu Mission, where they've been experiencing a revival amongst the Zulus for over 50 years. And this year, they're celebrating 50 years of the youth conferences. Back in 1974, they began youth conferences, that's summer youth conferences and winter youth conferences at Kwasabuntu Mission. This is the scene from the air drone view of the people coming into Kwasabuntu Mission for the Sunday worship service this last Sunday, the 23rd of June. And you can see in the far right the boys' tent, the boys' accommodation this side. And that's the girls' eating tent, although the girls' accommodation tend to be more around that section down there where the school is. This is an overflow tent that could seat 3,000 extra, which they needed. This is the massed choir. When we say massed choir, this will be all the co-workers from different affiliated missions, Harding, Morrison, all over the place. Pumalanga, Schulzendal, absolutely magnificent, with the brass band as well. Well, Kwasabuntu revival began in 1966 at Mapamulu, but they've been at this location here since 1970. So next year will be will it be 55 years that they've actually been at this location. The theme for the conference was from 1 Chronicles 16:8, give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name, make known among the nations what he has done. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever. Well, Reverend Erlo Stegan's been a tremendous inspiration, an example of dedication and devotion to duty. Uncle Erlo was, without a shadow of a doubt, the most blessed, successful missionary in Southern Africa, if not the whole of Africa. And Bill Bathman said, upgrade that to the world. And my father-in-law, Bill Bathman, after whom this upper room, Bathman Memorial Hall is named, had ministered in 114 countries. He said, there's nothing to compare anywhere in the world. And I'm sure that's true. I don't think since Andrew Murray, South Africa's seen a minister as blessed and as impactful as Reverend Erlo Stegan. His lifelong dedication to God and his faithfulness in putting feet to his faith continues to be an example and an inspiration to all Christians. In fact, he continues to preach today, and his children and grandchildren and sons-in-law have been making films of stories he told at previous conferences, youth conferences, and these dramatized films were being shown to the students even now. So he's still preaching to us, and there's quite a lot of Uncle Erlo's messages that are resonating today. He's the only person I know who preached at his own funeral. And they found an amazingly appropriate sermon that he gave at a funeral, which even included him saying, you know, what's going to happen when he dies himself? And so that was the sermon at his funeral. So who do you know that preached at his own funeral? We all have so much to be grateful to Uncle Erlo for. God continues to use Uncle Erlo and the mission he pioneered to bless, challenge, enrich, and empower each one of us. There were people predicting the mission would fall away when he died. And Uncle Erlo said, no, it's going to go on 1,000 times better than it ever was before. And he had vision for the future. Well, they've just had their most successful youth conference ever. More young people than have ever been there. I saw a report recently from Germany that Kwasabuntu is deserted. There's no one there. There's just a few dogs walking the streets. Well, you'll see a few pictures of that. I also was told back in 1997, a co-worker at KSP came to me and said, Uncle Erlo is, not that he called him Uncle Erlo, is far too strict. He said, when his daughters turn 18, he will never see them again. Well, was that ever false prophecy? His daughters all living in and around his home, all of his grandchildren, 26 grandchildren, and how many people have that kind of blessing? Most South Africans' children and grandchildren are scattered across the continents around the world. And just to have them in the same countries in achievement, to have them all in the same house, on the same mission, involved in his work, absolutely phenomenal. And this was last year, the family, these would be the sons-in-law, the grandsons, daughters, grandchildren of Uncle Erlo. Not all of them, but most of them, in a single choir. What an achievement as well. Well, if you fly into KSP, which I've done sometimes, you can pass over the Tugela Valley like that, and this is what Kwasabuntu looks like from the air. And these are tremendous hot houses, and there's a lot more of those. The auditorium over there on that side. The airstrip in the middle. because many people have come in by air, and Uncle Ola loved his planes. And one of his planes crashed, and Dr. Kurt Koch wrote about that amazing crash, which no one died in, which was an amazing achievement too. But Uncle Ola sold his plane to buy the first equipment for Aquila to get up and running. So later, when Aquila got successful, they bought him a replacement plane, which was because he loved his plane. It enabled him to get down to Tugela Valley within just a few minutes, which would take hours to drive down to, for one of his church plants, which was the joy of his latter days. Now you can see here the original building. That was the original building. In the upper room was where they had their services. That was the reception. That was the back when they had switchboards. And if you wanted to know where anyone was, you asked the switchboard. They knew where everyone was at any time. And that was the hub of the whole mission at one stage. And that was the dining room for many years, where most of the meetings took place too. And so after each meal, they'd have to scrub the floor, because the amount of tea and sugar on the ground would be huge. And they'd have to scrub, or you could sort of hear the sticky as you walked along. And then they'd have the services, morning, afternoon, evening, in the dining hall. So you can imagine how happy they were when they got their own auditorium. And these rondavels, which all used to be thatched roof, but they now all have some kind of corrugated roof because the thatch was too hard to maintain. But those used to be for guests, but that's now for workers, co-workers, and that's the guest house. They built a big guest house there instead. The school is this long place here. The garage over here, carpenter shop on this spot, radio station far to the right. I think here you can see the radio station more. That's Aquila. Sorry, that's Radio Kwezi. Uncle Ola's home's here, and his children, who are all meant to be out of his life when they turned 18. The whole family's living in and around Uncle Ola's home. Every one of them. I mean, isn't that just phenomenal? I've approached here quite often, coming in, landing with a plane, been with one of Uncle Ola's planes, going down to Tugela Valley. And we've hiked all the way around here. We've run discipleship training course at Frontline in the past, and so we know these forests very well. And I actually witnessed a plane crash here once, when a plane landed here and went crashing into a building over on this side. That was quite something, seeing this burned out wreck of a plane for a while. Just reminding you, you've got to be, here's one of Uncle Ola's planes on the right side. I've done a few baptisms in this dam as well. They've got all kinds of trout fishing and farming there as well. And Uncle Ola loves animals, so he's got a bit of a game farm too, with a range of wildlife. And this is the auditorium as it stands now. And under the platform, you've actually got a baptismal tank. They can remove the whole pulpit, and baptisms only tend to take place but once a year there, but that's where that'll be held. Notice above the pulpit is Here blyb by ons, Lord, remain with us, or abide with us. So you've got German, Zulu, Sotho, English, and Afrikaans. The same message. So Reverend Ola Stegen ministered for over 70 years. That's amazing, because he started at age 16 preaching the gospel. And he was brought up in a traditional German family, descendants of German settlers that came. He's a third generation. And so what happened was, back in the 1840s, there's a revival in North Germany, a North German missionary society started, and Reverend Louis Harms was the founder, and he got a vision of sending missionaries to Africa, but not just missionaries, but communities of Christians to support the mission, to make it self-sufficient. And so they found it too expensive to buy ship's tickets to Africa, so they built their own ship. They built the Candace, named after the African queen whose treasurer was converted in Acts chapter 8. And so the Candace came out, and the ancestors of Uncle Ola, and there's Uncle Ola standing at the back here, the ancestors of Uncle Ola came out as supporters, as farmers, to support the missionary. And so interesting that they now have the same model that was taught by Louis Harms back in the revival of the 1840s in Germany, that you don't just have one missionary, you have a community. The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the carpenter, the farmers, the dairy farmer, all of them come out and they provide a support base, and they're the counselors, and they're the financial support too, so that the missionary doesn't have to worry about funds and he doesn't have to worry about taking up offerings, but they are a self-supporting community. And that was the vision back in the 1840s, and it's fully fulfilled in the ministry of Uncle Olo now. This is a typical example of Uncle Olo preaching around Zululand back in the 1960s, and a fire service. Fire services were very popular, so people would bring their witchcraft charms and fetishes and burn them. I've decided to follow Jesus, no turning back. Like Cortez and his men burning their boats, that sort of thing. We've come here to conquer, we're not going back. And so the fire service is always an amazing time of people really having, this is the end. I remember at one point, Uncle Olo organizing a fire service for his twins, his young girls, that he said that they'd gotten addicted to their bottles and they were make an idol of their bottles, and they had to throw their bottles in a fire. And so they actually had a fire service in the kitchen, and he made his daughters throw their bottles into the fire, and that's it, no more bottles. Dummies and whatever else they were making an idol of at that stage. Can you imagine? I can imagine my kids might have cried at that. These are the co-workers, one of the original choirs Uncle Olo set up. Uncle Olo on the far left, and above him is our good friend Chell Olsen. Chell Olsen passed away just a few years ago on a mission to India. Here's Uncle Olo's favorite translator at the stage. And Chell Olsen, obviously Norwegian name, Norwegian background, came from a Lutheran background. And I should say, all the original missionaries of the Stegen family and the Witthauses and Engelbrechts and others who came out were Lutheran. And so Uncle Olo started his life as a Lutheran, and they threw him out when he started converting souls. He was too evangelistic for them. I don't know what Martin Luther would say about that. Now, Uncle Olo never had any interest in marriage, but at a certain point God made clear that he needed a partner and led him clearly to Auntie Kay. And Kay Dole, very much a co-worker, when he said, what percentage do you want me to give to you? Because I've got 100% been given to God. And she said, I don't want you to give any of the 100% you're given to God to me. I'm wanting to add my 100% to what you're giving to God's work. And she was the right kind of person for him, because she really was God's work comes first, and they were a good team. And here you can see some of Uncle Olo's extended family and some of his older children and the people by. That was the upper room where they held most of the services, and the reception or switchboard was below, and accommodation was to the left and to the right, including guest quarters. Olo Stegen worked very hard the whole time. In fact, his co-workers said that they would find his pillow soaked with sweat and tears in the morning. He was just so intense, and he would spend nights in prayer. And Fana Sabisi, translating here for Uncle Olo, don't think it would be him translating to Zulu, just because he's Zulu. Normally Uncle Olo preaches in Zulu, and his translator has to preach into English. But Fana Sabisi is a good friend. We dedicated Biblical Principles for Africa to him. He's the leader of Christians for Truth. I think this is one classic picture of Uncle Olo preaching in the field. Notice, preaching in a suit. Now, things have changed these days, but that was not unusual that a missionary would be expected to wear a suit, even during the weekdays in the heat, which KwaZulu can have a lot of. I think this is in many ways our favorite picture of Uncle Olo. The intensity of him. He was an intense man, but he could really be very gracious too. He is hard and tough in his preaching, but he could be so unbelievably compassionate as a counselor, which is surprising. You see, he's a lion in the pulpit, and you might be scared to go to him for counseling, but actually he was a very good, constructive counselor. And here he is with King Goodwill Swilentini, who is a good friend of the mission. Both Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and King Goodwill were regular visitors and good friends of the mission. And this is the first of the youth conferences. The first youth conference was actually all white kids And you can see Lydia Dube, who had the vision to start the youth conferences, to the bottom right of the picture. Lydia Dube is the one who died, had visions, came back, miraculous healing, and everyone thought she was completely dead, and she came back with visions of heaven, and one of her visions was, we must start these youth conferences, which must have been of God, because they're still going 50 years later. And by the second youth conference, coloured and Indian children were joining, and then Zulu children, and then it became, and remember, this is back in the days of apartheid, 1970s. That was not meant to be the way it was. The first time Frontline Fellowship ever had a camp at Pinkster Park, AFM campsite outside Somerset West. On the first night, I had the camp caretaker come to me and say, I'm very sorry, but I didn't know you'd have sulke mense met jou, hulle moet weg. And I said, well, we'll all leave. And he said, no, well, you can stay, maar hulle moet weg gaan. I said, no, if any of us are leaving, we're all leaving. So one of our friends lives in Somerset West, and she called up her parents, and they said, no, bring them all over. So our whole camp moved over to somebody's home, and we camped out in the garden, and that's back when Somerset West homes didn't have fences and walls. We're literally on the open lawn, on the corner of a plot in a suburb, and all queuing up for the bathrooms in the morning and showers. And some people sleeping in the lounge, some people sleeping in the garage, and most sleeping on the lawn outside. And that was better. So we got into trouble for having a multiracial camp. And that was 1984. This is 1974. And by 76, they were completely multiracial. And I'm sure the police were deeply concerned about this, because I had visits from the security police, National Intelligence Service, and military police, all wanting to know, are you a bunch of commies? Why are you going to Mozambique? Why are you going to communist countries? Why are you having multiracial camps? And so I'm sure Uncle Ola got a lot of trouble. In fact, we know now that there was somebody from military intelligence, Kosi Gref, who said that he was in military intelligence, and he was told to infiltrate KwaZulu in the 70s and to spy on them and report to the security police, because they saw him as subversive. And Uncle Ola with his family, and they have stood the test. Every one of his daughters has a ministry at KwaZulu, and they've got such a wonderful ministry and lovely people. And this is with Uncle Ola's grandchildren. An interesting comment, Uncle Ola had no sons, he had only 6 daughters, and he said not one of his Zulu friends ever congratulated him on the birth of any of his children, because they're all daughters. And he said traditionally the Zulu men will only congratulate you if you've got a son. But as one of his Zulu friends said to me recently, Uncle Ola ended up with 6 sons in all. And his first 6 grandchildren were grandsons. I mean, how's that? And this one Zulu friend pointed out to me that Uncle Ola ended up with 12, just like the Lord Jesus, and one of them was a Judas, which worked out in this case too. So 6 daughters, 6 sons-in-law, and I must say, while I've been super impressed with the daughters, I'm amazed at how dedicated the sons-in-law have been. They've been extraordinary, and they've all done a phenomenal job. This is the old auditorium that was designed and constructed by Dr. Philip Stott, who's been a good friend of our mission and a regular speaker at our Great Commission courses. You can immediately see it from the new auditorium because of the white panels in the ceiling and the fact that it's metal girders. And also they had lights, I should say windows, with a lot of daylight coming in, which killed any slide presentation or PowerPoint presentation. Not that we had PowerPoints back in the 90s, but still. The slide presentation killed by the daylight coming through there. And these panels here are curtains which could drop all the way down. They're meant to have been fireproof, but they weren't. And they were to blame for the whole auditorium burning down in 2008. You see these curtains at the back. Again, they were improvised for decor purposes, and the engineer, Dr. Philip Stott, really did not like those curtains, and he insisted they've got to at least be fireproof curtains, because most curtains are highly flammable. And by the way, hair is highly flammable, and hairspray is super flammable. And that's what caused the fire, because people started to live in what's meant to be offices behind, because there was a shortage of accommodation, and they had too many plugs on top of one plug outlet, and I think one cell phone too many. It fried, and the man went for the fire extinguishers. All the fire extinguishers were flat, no pressure at all. And so he went into the auditorium, and the doors were just behind the curtains. And as the man went through the door, he left the doors open. The curtains flapped in, caught light, brought the flames into the auditorium, and the whole place was burned down in 20 minutes. Now, we were taught in the fire brigade, if all the doors are open, a building, no matter how big or small, will be destroyed irretrievably within 20 minutes. That's why you've got fire doors, for example, in hotels and hospitals, which are often propped open, which should be closed, because fire doors are there for good reason. And this man went into the auditorium, and every single fire extinguisher he picked up had no pressure. They all dated back to the day that the auditorium had been dedicated, 1991, and now it was 2008. None of them worked. Just a warning, because Morrison's main building burned down in 2009, and Back to the Bible Mission's main building burnt down in 2010. So in 3 years, we had 3 major missions, had 3 disastrous fires. So I brought in electricians, and we rewired everything in Livingston House, because our wires were old. And you know, when these buildings were built, you had like one power outlet in every room, you know, maybe to plug in the vacuum cleaner once a week, or to have maybe a record player. But nobody thought of needing 5, 6, 8, 10 power outlets in a single room, which now is normal. And so almost all old buildings, wiring needs to be redone. These were all electrical fires. But this is the old auditorium, and you can see these blasted curtains that Philip Stott hated so much. And that was the IT department. They were up on a sort of platform up here. That was organizing all the sound and acoustics and so on. So that's the old building. And you can see these white panels, and unfortunately they were flammable too. And the pews, by the way, there were 5 kilometers of pews in the auditorium. I've got more story about that later. When the building burnt down, and we've got a video of it in real time, it lasts 20 minutes to see the whole thing burnt down. They went to the youth tents for some of the meetings, or the school hall. And then they rebuilt, and this time they rebuilt with wood from the Black Forest in Germany, much denser. They put a Bunsen burner on one of these wood beams all night, and it never caught fire. These are less flammable than the steel girders, which buckled very early and collapsed. So these were brought all the way from Black Forest in Germany, a very dense wood, and I saw these big trucks, Pentechnicons, with this extraordinarily long load, very, very, very long loads, getting these beams coming in. And putting it together was quite an operation. The foundation was not damaged, thankfully. And so the new auditorium is much, much, much better. Said the glory of the second temple was greater than the glory of the first temple. Now, 1991, when they were opening it, I was there when the gardener we were all going in, ministers' conference, and the gardener was planting trees right here. And I remember a visiting minister said, "What are you doing? You're wasting your time. Jesus will be back long before any of these trees have grown." So here you can see these trees 20 years later. And when I mentioned it to Uncle Olo, he laughed and he said, "A farmer said the same thing to my father when he was planting rows of trees on our farm." And he said, that was 50 years ago. And those very trees are what formed the 5 kilometers of pews that we've got in the auditorium. And by the way, the pews were about all that was saved. Many of the people ran in and brought out the pews while the fire was on, and at least they saved most of the pews. But it went from being a 10,000-seater to a 8,000-seater auditorium, mainly because of the pews that were lost. So this is the new guest facilities, instead of the old rondavels, which the co-workers needed. So this is where foreign guests in particular get put up. I've been put there a few times, and that was interesting. When I went there with my son once, he came in and he came out with a deodorant can, lit it I almost said a flamethrower, with a lighter, and created a flamethrower. I said, "Where do you learn this?" He said, "In the rondavels." So And back then they had thatched roofs, and the kids there were teaching them how to make a flamethrower with a deodorant can and a lighter. In a thatched roof building, I don't think that's a good idea. But anyway, that's what little boys do. Boys are super dangerous all the time. But there were times that Uncle Lolo took me in his plane down to Magogo. How do you pronounce that? Magogo. Yeah, but it's got a proper click, which I didn't give. Magogo. Right. And that was his last church plant, mission plant operation. He loved it. Here's his airstrip for Magogo. And Magogo is on track to being another Kwasibantu. And you can just see they've created oases. When he came there, the local chief gave it to him and gave him land and said, we can grow nothing here except thorn bushes. Can you do something with it? And he gave him a home and a place. And Uncle Lolo turned the wilderness there into, as you can see, magnificent, flourishing farms. Just absolutely extraordinary what they achieved. And my daughter in 2011 and I were able to go with Uncle Lolo as he showed us very happily his new project, and you could just see how much he's loved by the people. You know, for example, Kwasibantu came down, fixed the roads, built a bridge which they needed, and managed to get work for so many people, and so much that they're able to harvest pineapples, bananas, dragon fruit, all sorts of things that in a place where the people thought you can't even grow maize here. And Uncle Lolo said the secret is irrigation. Irrigation and fertilizer, of course. But the irrigation is magnificent. And by the way, some government drone or satellite image or whatever saw all this flourishing things, so they came along and said, oh, you're irrigating from the Tugela River? You owe us taxes for the water you're taking out there. And isn't that amazing? I mean, nobody's doing anything with this water. He suddenly provides jobs for people and food for the whole community, and then they want to tax him on the water that God provides. And then at one stage, I mean, this is just being stopped on the road by people who are just so excited to see Uncle Lolo. I mean, what he did for the people's lives there. In fact, at one point, they tried to get electricity in the valley, and Eskom was not interested. There's not good enough reason to. You know, people there apparently aren't that important. So Aquila organized the electricity for them. And when the electricity finally came to them, and they had to pay a lot of money to make this happen, an ANC MEC came along and told the people, look what the government's done for you, provide you with electricity. And the people stood up and said, don't lie to us. We know this is only Baba Mfundisi. He's the one who's provided the electricity, not you. You've done nothing for us. And the people on the ground know what's going on. Here's the school, DSS, Dominee Servat School, which has provided some of the best education imaginable. They've sometimes had the top student in the country. And they've got a 100% pass rate in matric for 30 years. Who has a track record like that in the country? Is there a government school that can compete? And these are, I mean, just look at the trophies at the back. They win a lot of sports competitions. And DSS must be one of the best schools around. The quality is exceptional. They've got such dedicated teachers and phenomenal standards. And you can see it just with the dress code. And then there's Cedar College, or Cedar International, Cedar Teacher Training College, which has attracted teachers coming from around the world, even from Korea, from Germany, Switzerland, France, Romania, to study at Kwasibantu Mission. Here's a chaplain's, or chapel service, I should say, for Cedar College in the morning. And Cedar College has been a great blessing. We've donated tons of books and Bibles to them, study Bibles, over the years. These are some French students at the Teacher Training College receiving some of our books. And here's some of the Teacher Training College choir singing. And here you can see quite well the English, Zulu, the German, the Sotho, and then the Afrikaans is just off to the right. And delivering books is a key part of what we do. Christians for Truth did a lot of phenomenal work at Kwasibantu for many years. Pro-life, pro-family demonstrations, all kinds of marches, parliament, and so on. Their shop here is so popular, Uncle Lolo insisted the bread must always be subsidized. I think the bread is 5 rand there, whereas normally bread is about, 18, 19 rand a loaf, most places. And during the riots in 2021, the local people said to the thugs who wanted to come and burn down the shop, No, you can't burn down that shop. I think the Millie Meal is also heavily subsidized. It's the cheapest food you can get anywhere. And so the people refused to allow the thugs to go and burn the shop because it's the best. Uncle Ola was showing me there one stage, showing me the new building. And as we walked inside, and it's air-conditioned inside, there were two mamas standing there, a Zulu woman. They said, and he translated for me, they said, now I can die and go to heaven. Now I've seen everything. I mean, this, so clean, so organized, and all the things they could get. And I've heard similar kind of things being said down at Magogo, because people are so impressed with the quality of the shop. And these are, I think, some of the women's accommodations, boarding school, which is attached to the school. Radio Kwezi is the largest Christian community radio station in the country. 24 hours a day, 4 languages, German, Afrikaans, English, and of course Zulu. And some of the presenters, and they've got so many trophies because they're an award-winning radio station, phenomenal things they've done over the years. And Kwezi's got a lot of great operations, and this is what it looks like at night, and their studio, live, the main studio. There's other recording studios. I tend to go into recording studios like D Studio to record a Word for Use, which is 3-minute devotionals, which comes up just before the hour normally. And that's been something we've done over the years and years of producing hundreds of Word for Use. Even got 14 of them done while I was up there now. Uncle Urlo's home is an oasis in many ways, and he's always been a great friend and counsel and encourager to this mission. When I first went there, I was a 26-year-old single missionary on a motorbike, and Uncle Urlo and his wife, Auntie Kay, gave me their bedroom, and I was quite put out by that. I didn't want some older people's bedroom. I mean, you could give me a mattress on the floor. I'd sleep on the floor, and I don't even need a mattress. Just give me a sleeping bag, and I'm happy. But Uncle Urlo was always so gracious, so generous. And at one time he said to me, if I was younger and if God hadn't given me this mission, I would like to work for Frontline Fellowship and go into Sudan. He said, God has given you a great privilege. And he several times said, I'm jealous of you. I would like to go into the field and walk in Nuba Mountains and minister there. Well, who would want a greater ministry than what he had? He's been the most blessed missionary of our age, but he even was interested in small initiatives like our own. One of Uncle Urlo's lovely cats, Uncle Urlo loved animals, and he had his own game reserve. The ministers' conferences are held every 2 years, and they've been a great blessing, a phenomenal opportunity. Uncle Urlo could attract 1,000 ministers. Later it grew to 2,000, 2,500 coming from all over the world. People coming from Russia, from 65 countries, from all over Africa, from all over the world even, to these ministers' conferences for a week of really serious seeking the Lord. And I've heard him preach hard against sin, and he's given me the opportunity to minister quite a lot of times. There have been times that the ministers have been in such conviction of sin. I remember him preaching on Jeremiah 48 verse 10, cursed is he who does the work of the Lord deceitfully. And he really hammered it home. I mean, we were all under great conviction of sin. I came back from that particular ministers' conference and fired 4 of our missionaries. Another 4 fled before I could get to them as a result of what Uncle Urlo had taught. And here you can see different conferences over the years and different flags represented, different people represented coming in. Absolutely phenomenal ministries and opportunities. Now, did I just see Christoph there? Is that Christoph? Yeah? One of IT people. Must have just been checking that we were linked up right. So we've done biblical worldview presentations, New World Order, and I've had the opportunity over the years to join in on many of the different conferences. It's been a tremendous privilege. And they've got so many choirs, great choirs, all kinds of tremendous choirs from all over. Here you can see plainly the 5 different languages up in the woodwork, with Afrikaans top right. Uncle Urlo was always impeccably dressed, and his messages were always direct, hard-hitting. You can see that the new auditorium is absolutely phenomenal. And the ministers' conferences, I think, grew up to 2,500 people at a single ministers' conference. This would be a young people's choir, the brass band, and this would be a massed choir at one stage. When they incorporate the school, they can't incorporate the school in a mass choir now. There's not enough space for them all. young people's choir. And a view from the top. Again, you've got the school. You've got the, that's the school there. You've got the original building. You've got the main dining hall. This is the hospital. I think most that's a hospital there. Or is this the hospital? No. Sorry? This one, the hospital where it's more like a counselling hospital. People come there because the doctors can't do anything more for them, and they get counselling. And many times, people's sickness seems to be more psychosomatic, where by dealing with their sin and repenting and confessing, they get healing. Or maybe it's like the man who was paralyzed being let through the roof, that the Lord could see his first problem was that his sins need to be forgiven. Then he could take up his bed and walk. And that does happen. Now, the auditoriums to the right, we thought that was big. This is Aquila. Now, I remember when Aquila was basically that size. And then now, this is Aquila 1. There's Aquila 2's in Franschhoek, and Aquila 3 is just across the way. We'll show that just now. But the tent, normally where the youth conferences were held, and now since the auditorium, it's being used for meals for the boys. And you get a bit of a feel of the intensity and amount of people gathered. This is now a youth conference. And they've been averaging 3,000 to 5,000 a youth conference coming from the outside, not counting the internal people. But this last one was 6,900 from outside registered. And there were at least 8,000 people there. It must have been from, if you count the workers, helpers, the youth who live on the mission altogether, it was over 8,000 this time. And I've many a time, I think you can recognize some of our local people from Morrison. And the IT desk is now in the forward section of the main block, so they're much more on top of everything. And this is the SIPSA choir, Concerned Youth South Africa. Many of these chaps come from drug and gangster backgrounds. There's one Indian young person I counseled at the end of one of these events who was not even 18, and he had already organized a hitman to murder his father to get control of family business. I mean, can you imagine the kind of problems you've got to deal with young people? But they've got phenomenal testimonies, and if you want to get some of their testimonies, you go onto Devoted magazine. Gerda Potgieter has been putting together a lot of testimonies with these chaps and hearing how God changed their lives. I think this is why people keep coming to Cross the Runs for the youth conferences. Word of mouth, testimonies. This is real Book of Acts Christianity. You can get freedom here. You can get freedom from your sins. You can find grace. You can find God here. You can, well, not that God's lost. We don't find God. He finds us. But you can have peace with God. And so this is just some of the trophies of grace. These young people who came together, many gave testimonies there at a previous youth conference I was at. Uncle Ola at one stage had an altar call. I think this might have been 2018, if I remember right. And these are the people who responded to the altar call. Can you imagine? Well, back in 2017, Uncle Ola asked if we could organize meetings for the Eurochoir, and the Eurochoir came to Cape Town. We hired out the amphitheatre at the waterfront, and there's a lot of people come here, and this is a wonderful opportunity to proclaim the gospel. And so people came from all over, up in the upper galleries as well, and we were able to present the gospel in song. The wheel was right there, and what an opportunity. Uncle Ola was opening in prayer at the beginning, and I had security come to me and say, we've got to close down, clear the stage right now. A Jewish woman's complained that the man there's mentioned Jesus. And, well, of course, Uncle Ola was praying. So I said, we've got permission. These people have come from Europe. They're from 11 different nations and so on. And where's your supervisor? So as a stalling action, I asked for the supervisor. That took time for him to come. And by the time this person came and he's telling me, no, you've got to close down. We've had a complaint. I said, you've had rock bands up here. Some of them are singing swear words, and now you want to clear it because of the gospel. Well, by this point, they were singing something like Amazing Grace, and the audience, the shoppers were just joining in. And I said, do you want to riot here? Look, they love this. And in the end, the security supervisor gave up and walked away. And we continued. So that's so important that you don't take the first order that they give. This is spiritual warfare. There's always going to be people who are going to try and shut you down when you proclaim the gospel publicly. But this was magnificent. By the way, I was super nervous when they all came here. We had a very sunny time, end of October 2016, this is, beginning of the Reformation 500. And so I kept reminding them, put on sun cream, you're going to get sunburns. And they so like the hot weather and the sunshine. You know, they come from Europe, these poor people, Switzerland and Netherlands on. They don't know what the sun is. They're in the middle of winter. And they came here, said, you're all going to be red by tomorrow if you don't put on sun cream, stay in the shade. And of course, we did lots of literature distribution and a lot of people interested. For the Sunday, we hired out the Strand Street Lutheran, the oldest Protestant church in the Southern Hemisphere. And this church was illegal when it started, so it's built like a warehouse. And the Dutch East India Company forbade any church except the Dutch Reformed Church. So the Lutherans, they built it like a barn. They added a steeple afterwards, and they had illegal service in here starting in the 1780s. And later, Lutheran Church was legalized and they could worship openly. But notice the swan. The swan is very prominent in Lutheran churches because of Jan Hus's prophecy. My goose is cooked, he said, as they're about to burn him on a stake. But one day a swan will arise. 100 years from now, a swan will arise whose voice you will not be able to silence. And so many see Martin Luther as the fulfillment of the prophecy. He came 100 years later, and his voice the Pope could not silence. So you can see the swan very prominent in all Lutheran churches. Ein fester Burg ist unser Gott. A mighty fortress is our God. Luther's great hymn. Well, the Euro choir filled the choir stands in the front to overflowing, and we were packed out. It was a wonderful service. We filmed it. You can actually see it on our website. The choirs of Euro choir singing in Cape Town, singing A Mighty Fortress is Our God in German, in English, in Afrikaans, in French, and many other great hymns of the faith. This was a high point of the Reformation Society organizing at Franschhoek on Reformation Day 2016, 31st of October. We had in front of the Huguenot Monument a magnificent opportunity to worship the Lord and have this massed choir from Europe representing many nations, including quite a good contingent from France, and which of course is the whole heritage of the French Huguenots. And this has got to be our best Reformation Day celebration service ever. Absolutely magnificent. Gail, were you there? Oh, well, you would have remembered. What a magnificent opportunity. And these poor girls, I think some of them did get some sunburn, but we kept reminding them to cake on the sun cream. And we also were in the most beautiful Dutch Reformed church you could imagine, the Franschhoek Dutch Reformed Church, which has been a site of revival. Before the revival of 1860, it was just a rectangle. They added the side wings because of the revival of 1860. Those were added in 1861. So we offered a full Reformation Day Reformation conference concert with the Euro choir singing in the Franschhoek Church. Absolutely beautiful, exhilarating, God-honoring, and certainly the best concert we've had that we've organized as the Reformation Society. And this is some of the people who participate in this wonderful event. Euro choir coming from Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, France, Germany, Romania. Absolutely tremendous. And here they were singing at Kwastevante Mission shortly after that time that they were in Cape Town. And you can see magnificent choir. This is a ministers' conference back in 2021. My friend Marius Pretorius, who's the first person who told me about Kwastevante Mission, he was in my army unit. He is in 6th South African Infantry, and he became a teacher at Kwastevante Mission and became Uncle Olo's favorite translator after Chell Olsen went to be with the Lord. So this was back in 2022, December 2022, they celebrated 70 years of Uncle Olo's ministry. And that was a tremendous opportunity and real celebration events as well. And catering, absolutely phenomenal. Well, that brings us to this youth conference now, the 50th anniversary of youth conferences. These youth conferences start very humble and small, but they've grown over the years to an average of 2, 3, 4, 5,000 coming a year. And now we've got the statistics. 1 million young people have come through these youth conferences. Now, they might, in many cases, be the same people coming back next year, but they've accommodated 1 million people at the last 50 years, summer and winter. That's June, July, or December youth conferences. Sports day is always super popular, but the logistics is huge. Building an overflow tent, women's serving tent for supper and lunch, and here you've got for the VIP guests on Sunday, and the boys' meal tents on this side, in addition to the average workers having their dining room in the centre there. And this being the, that's got to be the shops. And this is an extra men's dormitory area. So the logistics is phenomenal. And you can see even the gardening's been well done, the hedges and so on. So this is opening day of the conference, people coming in. Bearing in mind, at this very time I was hearing from Germany that there's nobody at Crossavante. The place is deserted, as you can see. And the young people lining up at the school hall was registration. And so in registration, they're all being cared for already, and you can see the excitement for many of these kids. This is the highlight of the year. Many of them, when you speak to them, say, we never eat better any other time a year than when we're at Crossavante. They give the people a feast, really. It's not just catering, it's hospitality, generosity, above and beyond. And bearing in mind, they don't charge anyone for the youth conferences or the ministers' conferences. All the conferences Crossavante puts up, they're able to provide all their hospitality absolutely free, and that's because they have a farm-based, they're self-sustaining model of body, mind, and spirit ministry. And so I took some of these pictures, just showing me packed out auditorium, and on Sunday the choir singing. You could just sense the dynamism. Now, where did they accommodate all these new people? There was a bit of innovation. Some of the extras that weren't expected coming in, even after all their dormitories were full. They laid out pallets on the ground. There were some extra bunk beds, and then pallets with some cardboard on top, and then mattresses put on top of that. That's pretty creative. It works. It's not luxury, but it's effective. This is the girls' tent for being served meals. Now, just imagine the quantity. In fact, I've got the statistics. Let me just read you some of the statistics, because somebody worked this out, and it's quite phenomenal when you think of, well, what's involved in 50 years of youth conferences. So here's the statistics. 2,100 meal times, and that's meal times for thousands at a time. 500,000 loaves of bread. That's over the last 50 years of youth conferences. 57,000 litres of jam. 14,000 litres of milk. 200,000 kilograms of potatoes. 200,000 kilograms of sugar. 100,000 kilograms of sump. 200,000 kilograms of beans. 100,000 kilograms of chicken. 360,000 litres of maas. Now, maas is something you and I would probably not want to drink, but the Zulus like it. It's basically sour milk, is that correct? It's sour milk. And I remember my son, when we were queuing up, taking some of that, he thought it was yogurt. And was he ever disappointed? 1 million litres of diesel for the buses to fetch him. 1 million litres of diesel. 100,000 kilograms of meat. 500,000 kilograms of rice, 500,000 kilograms of rice, 200,000 kilograms of millie meal. And to transport all the food alone would have taken 61 interlink Pentecnican trucks to transport all the food. 1 million young people accommodated and catered for in the last 50 years of these youth conferences. So, I mean, this is a logistical achievement that you can only imagine. Our subject was Thanksgiving, so my presentation was on cultivating an attitude of gratitude. There's a lot in the Bible about that. On Sunday, we had quite a large police presence because there's so many VIPs, or what they call VVIPs, and there were large numbers of members of the royal families of Swaziland and Zululand. There's plenty of mayors, Nkosi's, chiefs, members of provincial parliaments and so on, members from the Premier's office. It was a real national event. I've got the feeling we were in the National Church of the Kingdom of KwaZulu. And just to give you a feel of what was involved, here's a video they put together. It's only 3.5 minutes long, but it's well organized. That was on the Friday night. That gives much more of a feel than you can with just slides. So the mass choir, the catering for Sunday, now this is the VIP tent, and just can't believe the amount of work into it. Right down to the picket fences outside it. These are tents of a different standard, and the amount of attention to detail. This is the VVIP tent, and you had a whole bunch of dignitaries and royalty up at the top table and so on. I somehow ended up in the VVIP tent, and we're not talking about a meal, we're talking about a feast. They're just absolutely threw you dead with hospitality, and the people serving in a VVIP tent were Uncle Olo's daughters and granddaughters. And just the standard, the quality, above and beyond. Here's just a normal VIP tent as opposed to the VVIP. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, VVIPs. But everyone gets involved. Now, my sports day consisted of moving a ton of literature. We've pre-positioned over 1 million gospel booklets in Zulu and a whole lot of other languages. And a whole lot of our books, this is their storeroom. So I had to sort this out the last time I was there for a youth conference. This time I re-sorted out a bit more and better with Gerda. And most of these boxes in the foreground were distributed to the youth on the Sunday night. We literally distributed 14,000 gospel booklets and tracts in one night. Everyone got 2 as they left. The marshals were well organized. I've never been able to distribute more than 5,000 leaflets at a single occasion before. So this is a bit of a record for us, 14,000. And on one occasion, the speaker urged us all to get on our knees and get right with God. And these are some of the responsive folks around the auditorium responding and seeking the Lord, and we were told not to get up till we were finished. Sports day on a Monday, the fireworks on a Friday night, absolutely spectacular. Let's show you a bit more of that. This is the drone at night. If you've heard of infrared, this is sort of how the military see things at night with what's called infrared. Not that it's infrared here. You can see the people moving. That's normal camera, and then they go to infrared. By the way, Kwasibantu mission does not have load shedding, not because Eskom's not incompetent in KwaZulu. They've got their own power station. They basically provide their own power. When a power trips, you might have a few seconds, but it goes immediately onto their backup system. So imagine if the country was run by Christians of this kind of order. We wouldn't have power failures. Now, I was somewhere in this Shangalolo group. If I'd stopped walking, I would have just been carried along forward by the press of the crowds. I could have kept my feet off the ground and still got there. And you can see some are going the high road. They're going to watch the fireworks from the airstrip. Others are coming down to the actual school sports field. Let me jump ahead a bit here. 1974, 2024. 50 years of youth conferences. And that's all people making up those lights. You know, if you think we're living in a dark world and each Christian's witness like a light, it's quite symbolic. That's Kwasibantu at night. Now you've got an idea how it is for soldiers in a helicopter wearing infrared goggles, how they see things at night. They can spot you at night. And by the way, one thing we were told in the army is don't iron your clothes. If you iron your clothes shine out at night to people with infrared goggles. Now just watch as the fireworks start. So this drone is quite high. Can you see that that's a torch? These 2 men, they're walking at the top of those 3 men to start the fireworks. So again, just one person. Now, we used to do this as well. You'd go to great distance and a soldier in a tower would light a cigarette and you could see this light from kilometers away. But just the warning of, it's a bit stupid if you're at the border standing guard duty and lights a cigarette. But any light just for infrared will come out so amazing. Now here he's got the infrared turned off for sure at this moment. You should have heard the screams and the shouts of joy from the kids. I'm sure most of them had never seen anything like this before. Sorry? I would imagine, yeah. Just feel sorry a bit for the dogs because, you know, their hearing is so much more acute. They must have been a bit disturbed by that. by the way, the kids were also getting lollipops, and saw the boys walking around with packets of popcorn, and they just went above and beyond. There was so much hospitality being given. Well, this is the first time in a PowerPoint that I've been able to integrate video. Vaughan taught me something new today, how I could integrate videos into a PowerPoint presentation, but I've never done that before. We're told there's celebration in heaven for one soul who repents. By the way, when I came out the army, I smuggled a parachute flare from the border, went in the middle of Rondebosch Common and shot up this parachute flare. Incandescent, and comes down slowly and disappeared before the police could get there. But seriously illegal to smuggle things like that back from the border. But it was just such fun to see this parachute flare go up in the middle of Rondebosch Common. And that's Dietmar talking and playing in the background.
Sibonga nalabo bakuhlelile sicela uNkulunkulu bangabuyela khona auditorium ungakhohle kubalekile leyo nto buyela khona ngoba uNkulunkulu ukuthintile asithandazeni yakho sibonga nokusebenza kwakho nosigcina abasha yonke leminyaka sesiyacela ke uNkulunkulu wethu qhubeka nathi.
So if you want to be dark at night and the chaps in the helicopters of infrared, just know they can see you. Without infrared, that's what you see. So 1 Chronicles 16, give thanks, Lord, call on his name, make known amongst the nations what he has done. Give thanks, Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever. So we praise God for his abundant grace that he has poured out through the ministries, the multitude of ministries that continue to flow from this extraordinary mission in KwaZulu. Do you think there are now bases all over, as far as there's a mission hospital in Mozambique, there's schools and mission bases around Europe, to think of the work that's continuing in many ways. Malawi's got a phenomenal mission station amidst the Yao people, a completely unreached Muslim majority tribe. And these are just some of what Kwasibantu has done. They've got down the road at Morrison, up on Onseepkant on the Orange River in Northern Cape, Shulzendal in Mpumalanga, Pelindaba outside Pretoria. And the story is given in Bondservant of Christ, which we've now helped them produce as an ebook and as a print on demand as well. So aside from getting the book of Uncle Lula's story, it's not just his story, it's a story of Louis Harms and the Hermannsburg mission, the Northern Germany mission society that built the canvas and came out here. More than 200 pictures in here, many of them in color. And should also say Uncle Ola wrote one of the forwards for our From the Frontline book. He wrote the forward for Bill Bathman's Going On book. He wrote forward also for Answering Skeptics and Character Assassins book. I dedicated Putting Feet to Your Faith book because I couldn't think of anyone who deserved that more. He also wrote an introduction to Practical or Practice Discipleship and Practical Discipleship. So there's a whole lot of our books which Uncle Ola's connected with too. And in our library, you can see a whole lot of pictures of their ministry and this photo book on Kwasibantu mission. And it's absolutely phenomenal. Just to see all the different multitude of ministries and the work behind the scenes. So Bondservant of Christ, which is also available in German. It's being translated Afrikaans and of course in Zulu, of course. And then Journey to the Truth, which our friend Gerda Potgieter of Devoted Magazine put together. Well, we've just helped to develop it into Lulu as a print on demand. Anyone, anywhere around the world, can get it available in print, even if they're in Mongolia or Trinidad, New Zealand, Prison Island, and as an ebook available. Amazon, Kindle, and so on. So these books, now anyone, even out of the range of the post office, can get these printed. So Christian Liberty Books, of course, is selling all these books, along with ours, many of which Uncle Ola either did dedications to or wrote forwards and introductions to. Print on demand is the way of the future. With the post office no longer working, we've got to find alternative ways. Print on demand through Lulu and ebooks through Smashwords is the wave of the future. So we'll have this and so much more available in Kwasibantu on frontlinemissionsa.org, including tonight's presentation. We've got a whole tribute to Uncle Ola with many different audiovisual links under our in memoriam pull down on the Frontline homepage. And we've got to have a world vision. Kwasibantu's missionaries are going all over, and people from all over are coming to the ministers' conferences. So I think next year will be another ministers' conference. That's something else to pray for. And they did a whole study of pictures and video footage from, or not video footage, 16 mil or maybe it was 8 mil films from the early youth conferences. And so they put this together, which basically gives us a overview of the youth conference of the last years.
Ngo-1948 lapho umfundisi uStekeni eseneminyaka eyi-13 ezinikele enkosini. Ngo-1952 uNkulunkulu wambizela emsebenzini wakhe. Kuleso sikhathi wayeneminyaka
presentation at the Reformation Society in Cape Town.
Washiya ikhaya lakubo. Esephothule izifundo zakhe, uNkulunkulu wambizela ukuba abe ngumvangeli kubantu bakwaZulu ngonyaka ka-1955. Yena wayeseneminyaka engama-20. Umfundisi wasebenza ngokuzikhandla, eshumayela iqiniso nokuphenduka, engagigiyeli. Wayitakula imiphefumulo emasangweni esihogo. Emva kweminyaka eyi-12 enza lo msebenzi, wazithola ekwangqengetshe ngokomoya, ngoba ezizwela ukuthi wenza into engenampumelelo. Wayebona abantu bengaphenduki ngokuphelele ngezintshumayelo zakhe, bebuyela ezindleleni zabo ezindala. Ukulangazelela imvuselelo kaNkulunkulu kwakhulu enhlizweni kamfundisi uStekeni. Wabe sehlanganyela nebandlana lakhe lamaZulu kwamaphumulo, bagxile ekufundeni izwi nasekuthandazeni. Umndeni wakaDube wawuyingxenye yaleli bandla. Lo mndeni wakaDube wawuhlupheka kakhulu ngoba ubaba wakhona wayegxile ophuzweni olunamandla. Umama uHilda Dube waphendula izintshumayelo zikamfundisi uStekeni. Impilo yakhe yashintsha kangangokuba kwaze kwaphenduka nezingane zakhe ezimbili, indodana uJabulani nendodakazi uLidi. Kwagcina sekuphenduka nomnumzane uDube ongusokhaya. Leli bandla elincane lagcwaliswa ngumoya ongcwele ngo-1966. Phakathi kwalo kwakukhona umama uHilda Dube, nendodana yakhe kanye nendodakazi yakhe eyayineminyaka eyi-14. Zisuka amadaka nje, le ndodakazi yakhe yabonakala inogcobo olukhethekile. Nomfundisi uStekeni Imbala wakubona ngokushesha lokho. Ngonyaka ka-1968, uLydia washiya isikole eseneminyaka eyi-16 ngoba elandela ubizo lukaNkulunkulu.
Esemusha,
When she was younger,
wathi ukuzizwela uNkulunkulu embizele emsebenzini wenkosi
she said she feels
asize nabasha.
the Lord calling her into full-time service, especially to help young people.
Kuthe ngo-1970, ngenkathi kusuka kwamaphumulo kuzoqalwa kule ndawo yakasiza abantu, uLydia wadlala indima enkulu ekuqaleni kwemishini, ikakhulukazi ezingadini zokudla, ukuze kuhlinzekwe abantu ababezofuna usizo emishini. Wabamba iqhaza elikhulu ekwakheni ubudlelwano obuhle nomakhelwane bemishini. Wayekuthanda ukunakekela abantu asebekhulile, ebaxhumanisa nomfundisi uStekeni, okwagcina kwakhe kubudlelwano obuhle phakathi kwabo nemishini kuze kube manje. Ngonyaka ka-1973, uLydia wahlatshwa ukugula okukhulu. Ukusebenza kwakhe ngokuzikhandla emasimini, ukuthunga nokunakekela abantu asebekhulile kwabhebhezelisa ukugula kwakhe wagcina ngokudlula emhlabeni mhla ka-8 ku-April ngo-3 ntambama ngawo lowo nyaka. Ukufa kwakhe kwaba nomthelela omkhulu kumaKristu emhlabeni wonke jikelele nasemsebenzini kaMfundisi uStekeni ngoba uNkulunkulu wakucacisa ngokusobala ukuthi izulu lingenwa yilabo abahamba ngendlela engumngcingo kuphela. uNkulunkulu waphinde wamvusa ekufeni emva kwamahora ambalwa ukuze aqhubeke nomsebenzi wakhe. uLydia waholwa umoya oyingcwele ukuba aqale izinkonzo zabasha. Lo mbono wawuxoxela umfundisi uStekeni.
uSister Foss waqala ngabasha.
Sister Foss began with the young people.
Fika abamhlophe,
White people came.
Ngasemaphethelweni onyaka ka-1973, uLydia wazizwela umthwalo ngezingane ezimhlophe. Abazali bazo babezifisela ukuba zigxile kumazini uNkulunkulu. Lokhu kuhlangana kwabo ngezimpelasonto kwakufaka izifundo zeBhayibheli nezingxoxo ngesigameko uLydia ahlangana naso ekufeni nasekubonisweni indlela engumntu. Nakuba kwakukhona ukugxekwa, uLydia waphikelela enesiqiniseko sokuthi kubalulekile ukuhlanganisa abantu abasha. Kuyo yonke leminyaka iningi lalezi zingane lama okholweni laba yizinsika emsebenzini weNkosi. Ubufakazi babo buyisibuko somsebenzi kaMfundisi uStekeni kanye namandla okusebenza kaNkulunkulu ngemvuselelo. Sekubonakala amandla angcwele alokhu kuhlangana ngezimpelasonto. Izisebenzi zabe sezihlela ingqungquthela yokuqala ngonyaka ka-1974. Evikini lokuqala kwahlangana izingane ezimhlophe, kwalandela amaKhalathi namaNdiya. Nezingane ezinsundu zagcina nazo sezihlanganyele emva kokucelelwa ngabazali bazo. uLydia wethula ubufakazi bakhe ngezulu nesihogo, eyihlabe ihlikiza indaba yokubandlululana ngokuhlanga, kodwa egqugquzela ukuphenduka okupheleleyo kubantu abasha. Kuthe ngonyaka ka-1975, umfundisi uStekeni waqeqesha izisebenzi zokuqala esebenzisa izindaba zikaCity Study kanye nencwadi uhambo lomhambi kaJohn Bunyan. uLydia wenza okufanayo kubantu abasha, ebona isidingo sabo sokomoya. Ezingqungqutheleni zabasha, umfundisi uStekeni, uLydia kanye nezisebenzi babeshiyelana inkundla ngokufundisa ngezwi likaNkulunkulu. Abazali bazibonela ushintsho ezinganeni zabo ngoba zazibuya zixolise. Umsebenzi wakhula. Izingqungquthela zabasha zaqhubeka njalo uma kungama-holiday school. Nakuba kwakunezingqinamba ngezindawo zokuhlala nesimo sezulu, konke lokho akuyinqindanga intsha ukuphinde ibuye izolalela izwi likaNkulunkulu. Ekugcineni yakhiwe i-auditorium ekwazi ukumumatha umthamo omkhulu. Lezi zingqungquthela zaqhubeka nokusabalala kanye nokuzuza abasha ezindaweni zonke. Ingqungquthela yabasha yaqala ngedlanzana labantu abangama-30 ngo-1974. Yakhula. Njengamanje imumatha abantu abaphakathi kwezinkulungwane 4 kuya kwezinhlanu ngamaholide asebusika nawasehlobo. Ake sibheke ukukhula nokubusiseka kwalomsebenzi.
The original transports, 2 cane trucks standing up only.
Here you Here we'll see different. It's not finished yet, so let's not put the lights on. Wait, we'll watch here the different
Presentation.
areas like transport. This is how the first ones came, and we see it up to 2023.
Manje ke lana sesobona ke njenge into zokuthutha ukuthi ekuqaleni bekunjani kwaze kwanjani kufikela ngo2023.
What the accommodation was like, what the various services were like, what the cooking was like.
So bona ke nendawo zokulala ukuthi qala bekunjani nendawo zokuphekela indawo ezinsiza kusebenza ezihlukahlukene ukuthi bekunjani iqala sekunjani manje.
Let's continue.
You see, these buses are actually towed by the so-called horses that normally pull the pillar trucks. You like the old pictures? Saying that was the normal kitchen for all the meals outside cooking pots like that. To those things. From religion, because they had to wait for the Lord to provide each type of equipment they need to steer themselves each day. I think you can see a dramatic change comes with the establishment of Aquila. Then suddenly they have real sponsorship to do so much more. Sexual notes, beach, see the ocean. That was the tent that was blown over the little white one before she's done. Yeah, this tent went flying in the little one. And still amazingly nobody entered. So here, they're inside the auditorium, the roof's up, but they've done the inside. So this is the auditorium that burned down the Chicago place. building in the end. See the damage to the filing.
Mawubuka iminyaka engama-50 yezingqungquthela zabasha ngokwezibalo, iyamangaza. uNkulunkulu ugcinile umsebenzi wakhe. Usiphila izinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zamalitha kadizili ukuze silethe abantu emishini. Izinkulungwane zezithuthi kanye nabashayeli bazo. Izinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zamakhilogremu okudla. Izinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zabantu abalungisa ukudla bapheke. Izinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zabaphakayo. Izinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zomatilasi bokulala. Izinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zamalitha amanzi ashisayo nabandayo. Izinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zamandla kagesi asebenza ihora ngehora. Izinkulungwane zezinkonzo ezakhayo. Amandla ezinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zamahora okululeka abantwana. Izinkulungwane ngezinkulungwane zembono nezindlela zokwethula ivangeli.
A lot of answered prayers. You think every meal, every trip, every litre, missions have to pray these in. It has to be the results of a lot of hard work. So, and so this should inspire us, encourage us to remember that everything starts small, but it can grow. Any questions, comments? Emma, you want to add anything, considering you've just been there? What did I miss out?
Everybody should go to buses around doing, even if it's just for a weekend, to experience it themselves.
It's true. I've tried, but you can't do it justice just with one presentation.
Can you
Jesse?
remind us about that amazing story, how it actually came about?
Yes, so a young girl, Lydia, had this vision. God has placed a treasure under the ground here at the mission. And so over the years, Uncle Lula was looking and he's thinking, what could it be, gold, platinum, what is it? And then at one point they struck, drilling and so on, they struck water, and it's such pure water, this Aquila water. And Aquila comes from a joint of the German and the Latin of a spring of water. And it's such good water. Do you know that Coca-Cola came and they got permission from every farm around about KSB in the 360, and they drilled down. They couldn't find any water. The mission just happens to be on the site of this most magnificent water in the country. And by the way, the farmer, the Indian farmer who sold the land to them in 1970, sold it because there wasn't enough water for his cattle. I mean, can you imagine? So Aquila has, and bear in mind, back in 1994, 92 or whatever, you couldn't have sold bottled water in South Africa. You know, there was no interest. There was no market for it. But because the deterioration of municipal water has gone down, people are wanting more bottled water. And so the timing of it was also magnificent. If they'd found the water years earlier, it wouldn't have had much of a market at all. So by the time they found it, which was 1997, they started selling the bottled water in 1998. It was as the market was growing up. And by the way, the funny thing is, at the beginning, is it Bon Aqua, or what's the water that Coca-Cola was making available? Bon Aqua. So Coca-Cola had on their water spring water, which they had to take off. A lawsuit was brought against it because it was just normal municipal water that they purified. So it was, basically Gauteng water that they called it spring water, and it wasn't spring water at all. And they couldn't compete against Aquila water. Aquila water is the best, purest water in the country. Absolutely extraordinary. And it's a gift God gave them to empower their mission. And they are empowering so many people, blessing so many people, so many communities. They send out teams just to fight litter and to work. The amount of times Uncle Olo has helped people with their funeral arrangements, paying for everything, organizing everything. I've got pictures of him actually in the grave, digging the grave, helping the people, carrying the body in. They've helped in so many ways, catering for people, and Aquila's given them the financial ability to do so much more than they could have ever done before. Their farm is effective as well, and the farm's feeding a lot of people, and they're selling to some of the biggest companies and chain stores in the country. They've got some of the best farming produce around. But Aquila is the dynamo that's driving it all, and that was the treasure underground. But who would have thought water was that valuable? And there was a time that bottled water was more expensive than petrol, although those days are past. I still remember when you could fill your tank for R5. I would normally get, after speaking engagement at a church, a R5 note when I started in the 1980s. And the R5 note could fill up your tank. Now, R100 can't even get your tank out of empty. Still on the E. So, but anyway, there was a time when bottled water was more valuable than petrol. It's the wave of the future. I don't even know how many millions of litres they sell a year, but it's a lot. And that's what's now enabling them to be so generous to people coming to youth conferences, ministers' conferences, and so on. So what a tremendous gift. That could be in the hand of a company that would waste all that and would not do any charity at all. But Aquila is completely geared to the community and to missions, and just phenomenal.
So apparently, they were looking for, because their water was not pure and clean.
Yes. In fact, the bath water was such a joke when you first got there. It was like brown water. You'd get in there, you couldn't see your hand under the water. I mean, sure, that's exactly it. It's just too good. To think that their competitors have tried everywhere around, but it's not a meter beyond their fence in any direction. So it is extraordinary. In fact, the way Uncle Olo told the story is when the man had tested the water, came back and said, "You can't use this water for showering in." And he thought, what's wrong with it? No, nothing's wrong. It's just so good you've got to bottle this and sell it. It's the best water. And so, what a phenomenal blessing from God. And it just is, what a blessing that we in South Africa have such an example. It's a shining light to the nations. And it's God's work. God has done this work. Give thanks to the Lord and make known amongst the nations what he has done. This is God's work. And in fact, Erlo Stegen always was careful to give all the glory to God. And, when people would praise him, even when I've said to the people this time, what a technological achievement, what a wonderful teamwork. This is really a technological triumph, I said. And this is God's work, and that's true. They do give all the glory to God, and it's magnificent, but it should encourage us all, because Uncle Erlo was faithful and God blessed him. And many times we think, when I was first converted, I got very discouraged. I looked around church, I thought, I don't see Book of Acts Christianity that I read about in the Bible. I don't see it in the local church. And when I got to KSP, I thought, no, this is Book of Acts Christianity. This is the real thing. And I think that's why young people keep coming to these conferences. No gimmicks, but it's reality. And that's what brings them coming back. That's right. That rock was Christ. And so the water coming out the rock in the wilderness, that's so symbolic. And it's been preserved and protected there. And now God's people are being blessed by it. And I don't know the logistics for Aquila. We've actually got a whole video from Aquila, their story, but that's something else for another day. And but who knows how many of their trucks go out? Vaughan, do you have any stats on that offhand? And we've got a film on that too. And of course, some stage we could organize a guided tour at Franschhoek, which is called Aquila too. They found also super high quality water. They needed another station. Cape Town is so far away, the logistics to supply Cape Town. And they found in Franschhoek just this beautiful, beautiful type of water as well. So, what provision of God. So you've got Aquila 1 in KSB, Aquila 2 here, and Aquila 3's at KSB, but further extended in the background. So, any other questions, comments? And counseling. Now, I know churches in America, like mega churches, if you need counseling, like grief counseling, marriage counseling, they charge you. And I don't know many churches that give free counseling. There are some. But KSB has done what? Over 18,500 young people have come in needing rehabilitation. If you went to any secular place for rehabilitation, it'll cost you thousands of rands, not talking about accommodation or food, just the counseling. And KSB will give you so much more than that. Love, prayer, and the people leave with changed lives. That's just the most extraordinary thing. They invest in you. They have time for you. And most of us in the city, you find someone who's willing to listen to your troubles or counsel you. Very few people are willing to give their time, even. They'll give you their time, they'll give you hours, days, weeks, months. They pour their heart and life into the people. And you can see the changed life. The symbolism in the Bible of living waters, this is such a popular name for many ministries as living waters. Ray Comfort's ministry too. Well, they've literally got living waters there, spiritually and physically. It's such a nice combination. Water is essential for life. The human body is mostly made up of water.